Hey there, Mr. Reddit here. Welcome back to another episode of r/entitled People Stories. Our first story we'll be reading today. Karen refuses to move her car, now she needs a new one. After that, entitled woman demands I leave the bus because my eye is scaring her baby. And after that, am I the jerk for sending my neighbor Venmo requests every day until he pays for the laptop his kid broke? Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen loses her car. Fine with me, I'll just drive yours, Reddit boy. So please smash that like button and subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. Karen refuses to move her car, now she needs a new one. The recent storms and fallen branches and trees I've been having in my area lately reminded me of one of my most favorite instances of karma that I've ever witnessed. As with my previous stories, this occurred at a hotel I was working at in upstate New York. It was August of 2011, and we were hunkering down in the hotel for the arrival of Hurricane Irene. We were getting all the necessary safety items and emergency lights in place in anticipation of the storm knocking out power at some point in the middle of the night or during the day. The night the storm hit us, I came in a few hours early before my night audit shift to help with any of the prep and setup. While I was standing at the front desk, the local police showed up and asked us if we could clear all of the cars out of the driveway in front of the hotel so that if emergency vehicles needed to access the hotel, there weren't any cars blocking their way. I had my valet guys move the cars over to the large parking lot off to the side and park them square in the middle, away from the trees and branches. As I was watching them move cars, a guest rolls up and drives up in her Porsche right into the driveway and parked it along the side. She was walking with a purpose, and before I even spoke to her, I knew what her response was going to be. Me. Excuse me, ma'am. Porsche driver. What? Me. We need you to move your vehicle over to that parking lot so we can keep the driveway clear for emergency services. I can have one of my valet guys move it for you. I'm not moving my car. It stays right where I can see it. Me. Ma'am, this isn't really an option. It needs to be moved or the police will have it moved. If you or the police so much as lay a finger on my car, I'm suing all of you. She stormed off to the bar, and that was the last we saw of her that afternoon. The police came back to check on us and saw the car in the driveway. They said, "Thought we asked you guys to clear the driveway." I relayed the story to them and said I could point the lady out at the bar. They just rolled their eyes and decided it wasn't worth the hassle. Later that night, as I was running the night audit reports, the wind picked up, letting myself and the overnight maintenance guy know that the storm was approaching. We stood outside under the Porsche and watched as the rain and wind started coming in harder and harder. At that point, a police car pulled up and parked in front of us just to make sure we were okay. We asked him if he needed a top-up on his coffee since we had brewed a fresh pot, and he took us up on that offer. As he got out of his car, the wind began breaking off branches on the smaller trees across the road and surrounding the parking lot where we had moved guests' cars. We went inside the lobby to watch as some of the trees began to sway and break, when all of a sudden we heard snap, boom, crash, beep. One of the largest branches from the tree next to our driveway had snapped off and landed square on the jerk's Porsche. The three of us watching let out a simultaneous, "Holy smokes." We sat there, stunned, when the maintenance guy spoke up. You're the police. Shouldn't you go out there and assess or something?" Policeman responded, "Yeah, probably should write up a report on that." We were sitting there debating whether we should call the lady in her room when the power went out, and we had to abandon the thought and go wake up the employees that were sleeping at the hotel so they could help set up glow sticks and lights on all of the floors. As the sun started coming up, some of the employees started walking the floor to collect the glow sticks and lights when one of them saw the Karen come out of her room and walk over to a window overlooking the driveway. She ran down to the front desk as soon as she heard a guest yell, "What the heck?" We anticipated the guest storming down to the driveway to survey the damage on her car, so we went into hiding, but made sure we had a great view of her walking around her car. She came storming back into the lobby and demanded to speak to someone in charge. By that point, our GM had already been briefed on the entire situation and was well and truly ready for whatever BS this lady was going to throw at him. I'm not sure what happened after that, other than a tow truck had to come and pick up her car. I believe she did try to sue, but there were enough witnesses to corroborate our story that she was asked to move her car for that very reason and she didn't comply. Entitled woman demands I leave the bus because my eye is scaring her baby. For a bit of context, I was born with only 7 months in the womb instead of 9. That said, it appears the right side of my body didn't form in a fully correct way. It's not that I am deformed and don't even look human. I just have some weird characteristics in my right side of my body. Like a small birthmark, one of my fingers in the right hand always looks jammed, and the most noticeable, my right eye is a bit smaller than the other and has a tiny deformity in the cornea. That being said, my right eye sometimes goes a bit to the right when I get too concentrated or too distracted, and I cannot control it. It just happens randomly and stops randomly, and I've been told that when I'm on moving vehicles, my eye seems to move alongside it. Like when it jumps or trembles, my eye does too. But I've talked about this to many medics and doctors, and they've all told me the same. No surgery can fix it, and an eye patch would only get my eyesight worse. I have glasses, by the way, like I cannot see. And by that, I mean that I sometimes cannot read big letters on the other side of the road. So, having said that, let's move to the story. Here where I live, when you reach middle or high school, it's the same here, secondary school. It's just basic and advanced/oriented. You no longer have PE classes at school, but on a club paid by the school. So to move there, I used the bus. The ride there that day was quite peaceful, just one whining baby. But that's not a big deal. But oh, the ride home, that was not. After 15 minutes waiting in the sun, the bus finally arrived, and I hopped in, paid for my ride, and sat down. Just a few stops later, enter the entitled mom and the entitled kid of the story. So, I was sitting at almost the back of the bus, and this lady, who looked like she was around her late 40s, and the kid, who looked to be on his 12 or 13 years, walked to the back. The entitled mom made a loud, ahem, noise, but I was not moving. There literally were seats next to her. It's just that they were the one-passenger seats on the right side of the bus. Naturally, none of us moved. She just huffed and sat down. The kid with her didn't sit down and just went standing, until the woman that was sitting next to me left, so he asked if he could sit there, and I moved to let him pass. Now this gave him a good look of my right eye since he was sitting next to me. At first, he didn't seem to notice, but then, oh gosh, he just stares at me for a full 10 minutes with a, "This is so wrong" kind of face, then moves from the seat and up to his mom. He didn't even whisper. Entitled kid, "Mom, did you see that girl's eye? It's weird. Is she disabled or something?" I pretended not to hear since I didn't want any trouble, but then the woman walks up to me. Entitled mom, "Excuse me, may I see your eye for a moment?" I was sure of what she was doing, but my stupid self decided to look at her anyway, and there she saw my eye. "Oh gosh, disgusting. Would you mind not doing that so close to my baby?" Me, doing what now? "Moving your eye like that. It's rude. Stop it." Me, "No, I can't. I would if I could." Now, this isn't a lie. I would stop it if I could control it. Entitled mom, "You brat. Stop lying. You kids these days are so uneducated." Now, the lady's yelling actually made the driver move to a stop and, well, stop and walk up to us. Driver, "What seems to be the problem here?" Entitled mom, "This brat is scaring my baby. Just look at her, moving her eye like that. You should remove her from this bus." Now, I didn't fully hear the entire conversation since the driver made her walk away from me to talk. But after almost 15 minutes of her yelling, kicking, screaming, and pointing in my direction, she just grabbed her kid's hand and stormed out of the bus. The driver just continued without a word. It happened like 40 minutes ago, and I'm so confused. Am I the jerk for sending my neighbor Venmo requests every day until he pays for the laptop his kid broke? I'm a high school student and I live with my family. I was doing some homework on the patio table outside and I was the only one home. I went inside to refill my water bottle and came back out to see my laptop on the ground and my neighbor's kid running around the deck. The neighbor lives next door in a different house. We don't have a shared yard, so I was not expecting his kid coming around. I tried to catch her and ask what had happened to the laptop, and she ran away to her own house and wouldn't talk to me. I went home and checked on the Ring camera and saw a video of my neighbor's kids running into the yard, running under the table, rushing up to the underside of the table, causing everything on it to tilt and slide to the ground, and running away in the under a minute I'd been inside. I downloaded the video to my phone and went to the neighbor's house to ask him for money to replace the laptop. I decided to ask for $1,700 for the laptop and $159 for the lost time that I spent doing the homework that I'd have to redo. I valued my lost time at the moment I'm paid at work, since I'd likely have to skip a couple shifts at work to redo the assignment. I went to the neighbor's house and he said he wasn't gonna pay because I shouldn't have left the laptop out and anything could have happened like rain or something. I said it was a clear day and I only went inside for a minute. Anyway, anything didn't happen. I had a video of his kid happening to my laptop. Anyway, anything didn't happen. I had a video of his brat happening to my laptop, and since she was too little to pay for it herself, he had to do so as her dad. He said no. Now, this might be petty, but I have his Venmo because my family and his family did a barbecue block party thing and I had to pay him for a share of the shopping. So every day I've sent a $1,859 request to him and he keeps declining it. I told my family and they think I shouldn't have left out the laptop and that I was harassing him doing that and they will replace it for me. They would use some of my college fund money, but I feel like they shouldn't have to pay. Plus, I'll need that college fund for college. So I've kept Venmo requesting him and also posted the video from the camera on the community Facebook saying, "Hey, any advice here? I had a neighbor's kid come to my house and break something expensive on camera. Are they supposed to pay and how can I do that? The parents have been refusing to pay a bunch of times. Is there some homeowner insurance to help? Sorry for dumb questions. I'm a high schooler and have never dealt with something like this before." Anyway, my parents found the post and got upset at me for stirring the pot and for continuing to Venmo request him. Am I the jerk for being so stubborn about getting paid for the broken laptop? I'm allergic to nuts. Help me. Miss, that's a lemon pip. So it was a Saturday, the day before Halloween in fact, so we all knew it was going to be a long shift and we would probably get a couple of crazies. But boy oh boy, we did not expect this level of crazy. To set the scene, our Italian restaurant is fairly small, a very small section in the front and a slightly larger section in the back where the bar and kitchen also are. Now this couple, a male and female, walked into the restaurant. They didn't book, but that was okay. We had enough spare room for a few walk-ins. I greeted them and set them down at a table in the front and asked whether they had any allergies or intolerances. They didn't, as we always do when someone comes and eats here. And then I got their drink orders, but nothing else as they were still deciding what to eat. At this point, everything was pretty normal. While the drinks were being made, literally 5 seconds after the order was put through, I go over to another table to make sure everything is all right with them, and this woman is clicking her fingers and shouting me over. "Excuse me, could you come over here, please?" I finish up with the customer and go over to the other couple. "Yes, are you all ready to order?" She goes and prattles off her order, and then so does her partner. I put their order through, and luckily nothing bad happened while they waited for their meals. Their food is ready, and I bring over their starters, and as soon as the plates touch the table, I start getting asked for various things for their meal, which I was just about to offer, and it was fine. It was just the way they said it, and I was starting to stress out a little since I was running food, drinks, and making sure the other tables were happy. We still don't know how it happened, but amidst all the chaos, this couple's main dishes come out while they're still halfway through their starters. Another server brought the food out. This Karen calls me over. "I'm not impressed with this service." I say, "I'm sorry about this mix-up. If you like, I can take the mains back and get them redone for you, so you don't have to rush and it doesn't get cold." She just gruffly says, "No," and waves me away. I take a glance at our partner, and he's happily enjoying his main meal already. After a couple of minutes, I get called back again. "This pasta you have cooked is so dry," because I'm apparently a chef now. Once again, I say, "I'm really sorry about that. If you like, I can have the kitchen redo it, or I can get them to put more sauce on it if it's too dry." I put my hand out in a gesture to take the bowl away, but she literally cradles the bowl. "No, just bring me some garlic butter." So I do. A few minutes later, I'm with another table near the couple, and she shouts for me, clicking and all, and seems to be in absolute rage. "Look what I found in my food!" Since I'm with another table, I just quickly say, "One moment please," and ask the table I'm with if it's okay if I go to see them, and I'll be right back. They agree. I walk over to Karen.
Look at this. It's a nut. I'm allergic to nuts.
I'm a little taken aback. Oh, right. Well, it doesn't look like a nut. It looks like the pip of a lemon, but I'll go check if the dish has nuts in it. I know for a fact the dish doesn't have nuts in it, and there's a squeezed lemon on her plate. But before I leave her, she starts gulping down her water and is literally pretending to go into anaphylactic shock, holding her throat, all while screaming at me,
You've ruined my night. You've ruined my food. It's all bland and tasteless. And it's got nuts, and I'm allergic to nuts.
She then proceeds to shove her plate at me. I take her food away and go to the manager and explain what's been happening. We take her main meal off the bill because we'd rather her just leave right now and not cause any more arguments. But just so we can cover ourselves, the manager goes over to her and explains that her meal was taken off, but that since I asked her if she had any allergies before they sat down, then it's out of our hands, especially because we asked and you withheld that information.
But I didn't know I was allergic to nuts until I had one.
The manager wasn't having it, so just calmly and point blank said, It was a lemon pip.
You have ruined my wedding night. You've ruined my anniversary. I am so disappointed, and I am never coming back here.
Then they both walk out of the restaurant. But a few minutes later, the husband comes in and embarrassingly asks if he left his cardigan here. He didn't. But then he says, I'm sorry about tonight. You've been wonderful. My wife is just a little... and gestures the crazy symbol to his head. And just before he completely walks out of the door to his angry, impatient wife, he smiles. Thanks for trying to make a bad evening pleasant. You've been great. And he leaves. Best part is, all the tables who saw what happened mocked Karen, with one table saying,
I need my dinner discounted because I'm allergic to jerks.
We all had a good laugh. You keep having my time estimates? You're right, my estimates should be more reliable. A couple of decades ago, I was working as the only technical writer in a fairly large team of developers. Our manager was Cambridge educated, liked to cut estimates, and was particularly convinced that my job was easy and quick, and that I was lazy and terrible at estimates. He'd point out that the worst typist could type a page of text in an hour, so I should be getting through at least 8 pages of user manual a day. When he halved my time estimates and gave me the new deadlines, I, like the doofus I was, slaved away, worked unpaid overtime, and squeaked on over the line. And then usually ended up taking a couple of days sick leave to recover. That eventually got me called into HR for being unreliable. Something in me snapped at that point. The next project, the same scenario played out. I gave my quite good time estimates. He halved them. I shrugged and accepted his pronouncement. He pointed out that I really needed to get better at estimating my time. Malicious compliance time. 2 weeks before the end of the 2-month project, he asked for an update. Oh, I'm a bit over a third of the way through the documentation, I said calmly, as though there wasn't a deadline staring me in the face. He blinked and asked for an explanation. Well, I told you it would take 4 months to do the amount of documentation you asked for, and it looks as though if I don't do any overtime, it's actually pretty close to correct, based on my progress so far. I beamed at him as though I was completely unaware that he had managers and a CTO who were expecting my documentation based on the information he gave them, along with the product it's describing, of course. Much to my surprise, it didn't even seem to occur to him to yell at me. The sheer confidence with which I delivered the devastating news had utterly confused him. He ended up helping me to cut down the requirements and then finished completing the documentation to meet the deadline. I worked my usual hours, and if he asked me to do overtime, played dumb and said, "No, sorry, I get sick if I do that, so I don't anymore." He worked a lot of overtime. I would walk past his office to see him staring at his computer monitor, biting his fingernails, and looking very, very worried. He wrote a lot of substandard documentation, and being a perfectionist, that really upset him. He didn't see his family much for 2 weeks. I spent a lot of my time at work trying not to cackle like a warlock who's had one too many pep pills. Once he had some time to recover, he called me into his office to discuss new ways of estimating time for documentation, and carefully suggested that maybe half a page to a page of documentation a day was a fair general estimate. Maybe. And perhaps at some point, we should look at hiring a second tech writer. Am I the jerk for thinking my brother reacted a bit too rashly for something that took place years ago? Some backstory is needed, so here goes. My brother, Mike, was an excellent chess player. When I say was, I mean he was forced to give it up by my dad. My mother just silently supported my dad, like most stay-at-home moms of her era. My parents had us way late in life. Mike was born when my parents were both 35, and I was an accident when they were 43 years old. They are both 65 now and are enjoying retirement. Mike loved chess and began playing it a lot. He was soon crushing older players, and the guys at the local chess club literally thought he was chess grandmaster material provided he got the right training and exposure. They encouraged him to play in tournaments as much as he could, even in the US Open Chess Championship, which was held annually. Dad wanted Mike to be a pro baseball player instead. He lost a ton of weight so he could play with Mike, got him the best coaches, and even flew him to Boston to watch the Sox. And he made sure he reminded Mike of it. Mike, meanwhile, won a bunch of trophies playing chess and hid all of them in my room so that our dad would not know that they existed. Dad eventually threw out his chessboard and prized antique chess set too. From now on, it was baseball all the way, but Mike sucked at it. Years of training, plenty of money down the drain, many meetups with retired players later, Dad finally realized that his dream was not to be. He finally gave up, and Mike was relieved. A fraction of the money that was spent towards baseball would have definitely pushed my brother to the top tier of chess. I asked my mother years later if they ever thought of getting me special training in swimming or lacrosse, two sports in which I was good at in school, and she replied, "Your father thought that sports were only for boys," and that was that. Mike is now a lawyer and is happily married with twin sons aged 4. My mother called last night and said that Mike had called them an hour earlier. He had binge-watched The Queen's Gambit, and all those memories came flooding back. He picked up the phone and tore into my dad, told him he was not their son anymore and that they would never be able to see the twins again. He said that this was payback for all those years when he was forced to do something he was not interested in. Dad broke down soon after they hung up, and my mother was very upset. She called him back, but he had already blocked their numbers. She then called me and told me what happened. I called Mike up and he did not answer. I then hung up and texted him saying he should not have said those things to Dad and that he should call them back and apologize. Mike replied stating that he was blocking my number too. I replied calling him a vindictive person and that he shouldn't deprive our parents of their grandkids' company and affection over something that took place years ago. Am I the jerk? I adhered to the sickness policy to the letter. In the early 2000s, I worked in the UK for a huge American insurance company. I managed a team of 10 to 12 administrators. The job was dull, the people were mainly great, and it was a steady place to work. Now, with this being a US company, the benefits package was poor compared to most UK rivals. Things like paid annual leave and paid sickness were the statutory minimum it was legal to give in the UK. I had this guy join my team who I shall call Dan. Dan was about 22 or 23, a bit of a plodder, definitely just there until he could find something better, and I couldn't blame him. One Monday, when he had been there about 3 months, he didn't show up one Monday morning. I was initially unconcerned, but when he hadn't called or shown up 45 minutes later, I started looking for his home phone number to check if he was okay. Right then, my phone rang, and it was Dan. He told me on the Friday night he had gone out with friends and got really drunk. When he got home, he decided to deep fry some chips, fries, on the stove. He fell asleep, and when he woke up, the pan was on fire on the stove, black smoke everywhere. Now, I think I would have just run, but as he was pretty drunk, he decided to open the kitchen window in his apartment and throw the fiery pan outside. He managed to get boiling hot fat all over his dominant hand. Fat spilled all over and caught fire, so he ran and called the fire service. On the way out, he grabbed his wallet, coat, and 3 CDs. Along with the clothes he had on, this was all that survived. The guy was really upset and told me he had no insurance for his possessions. He was going to be off sick for some weeks. The doctors thought he may need a skin graft on his hand. I told him to leave things with me. I would sort stuff out at work and would call him later. I called our local HR team, who said there was very little they could do. Due to his length of service, he only had 6 paid sick days left. He had taken a few already. I was shocked. I asked if we could bend the rules. No. Is there a fund we could donate something to him from? No. Feeling this was really mean, I called HR in our head office and got some answers. Very shortly afterwards, I got a call from our local HR manager, Claire, who was usually nice with me. We were on some of the same staff committees together. But today, she wanted to know why I had tried to go over her head, yada yada yada. She said that the sickness policy was clear and I had to follow it to the letter. Did I understand? You bet I did. Cue malicious compliance. I filled in all the paperwork to send to Claire, some of it authorizing the deduction of Dan's pay as he would exceed his sickness benefit that month. I think Claire was surprised I had rolled over so easily. I wasn't known for that. About an hour later, I sent her an email asking her to proofread a poster I had created to go on one of our committee notice boards. It was all about Dan and what had happened to him, and suggested ways the different teams could raise some money to help him out, as he had nothing and unfortunately wasn't entitled to any sick pay. I immediately got a "please don't progress this any further just now" email from Claire, and half an hour later or so, she called to let me know they were granting 3 months paid sickness leave initially and a goodwill payment of £5,000 on behalf of the company to help him get back on his feet. Dan was amazed at the magic I'd worked, and Claire was pretty frosty with me for about 6 weeks. Am I the jerk for paying my son back for all the chores done in mom's place? For context, I, 37 male, have 3 kids, 13, 9, and 5. 2 with my wife, who's 38, but my son is a stepkid to her. In our house, we have a very specific chore schedule that works in a way so all of us can do chores and still have plenty of free time, family time on top of homework and sports. It took a long time to come up with this system and the allowance system, as my wife has always been iffy about our kids doing too little to help and about us giving them allowance in the first place. We ended up working this out when the oldest were toddlers, and it's been the system for several years. Yesterday, I came home early and was getting ready to start with dinner when I noticed my daughter's and wife's nails were done in full with nice colors and even some nail extensions. The only time it could have been done was during chore time, unless she had gotten the kids home from school early. This is impossible. Our kids' school gives the other parents a call when they're picked up early, or she had skipped out on chores. With how strict my wife is about the whole thing, I heavily doubt she'd skip out on chores that only take 30 minutes for nails. My daughter had started talking about how much fun they had had. When I asked her how they found the time for it, she slipped up, admitting that her brother was doing their chores. When I asked how long, she went on to say since September. I then went to go ask my wife, who got deflective, saying our daughter had lied and that they had just rushed through chores that day. Told her I'd go ask my son about it, and that if it went about our daughter was truly lying, then we'd scold her for the lie. Checked it out with our son, and our daughter was right. He said he thought I was in on the change, and while he was talking, he brought up that mom said he wouldn't be paid since it was help and not work. I went right to my bag downstairs, got my wallet, and pulled out the entirety of September's money and gave it to him. I told him I'd go to the bank and get him October's money too for the full month, not just what he had worked for having to deal with this. My wife flipped out. She started an argument directly in front of the kids, and as much as I tried to calm her down and get her to talk privately, she wouldn't budge. All shouting ended up waking our toddler, who had been napping throughout this, and that's what finally stopped the screaming match. She's been calling me the jerk for simply paying our son without even talking to her, and that his chores were much too easy, so he had to do extra work to make up for his slacking. Note, he does the downstairs bathroom and the toddler's room, neither of which are easy, and that slackers shouldn't be paid. To prevent more fights, I compromised by letting the problem go and my son keep his money until we could figure the whole thing out. We're keeping the peace for Halloween, but haven't talked about it at all. Am I the jerk for not reimbursing my brother for an air mattress? This happened around Thanksgiving, but I'm still getting crap about it from my family. I'm a 27-year-old woman who lives in a 1-bedroom apartment by myself. My brother, 24, and his significant other, 22, have lived on the opposite side of the country, US, for a few years and decided to fly over to see their respective families, both of whom live around the same area. Neither my brother nor his girlfriend felt comfortable staying with their parents due to lockdown, so I offered them my apartment while I stayed with my significant other for a week. Everyone was happy with this arrangement. We never talked about it specifically before they arrived, so I just assumed that they would sleep in my queen-sized bed. I have a couple of couches in the living area, and while they are comfortable enough, they aren't designed to be sofa beds. The morning they arrived, I cleaned the apartment and changed the bedding. When they got to my apartment, my brother asked where they should sleep, and I indicated in the bed. He sort of laughed at first, and then realized I was serious and got really angry. His girlfriend didn't say much, but looked mortified. My brother kept saying that there was no way they were sleeping in my bed, and it was disgusting for me to offer. I told him that everything was clean and reminded him that they'd have the apartment to themselves. He just kept saying he couldn't believe it, and finally snapped that they'd have to make do with the couch. I left quickly without further discussion because I was confused and pretty upset. That night, my brother called me and said the couches were impossible to sleep on. He said that he and his girlfriend needed to purchase an air mattress and requested that I reimburse him the $55 they paid for it. By now, I was really upset and refused. I asked him again, why didn't they just take the bed? And he said,
"If you really have to ask, you have major issues."
I said that I didn't care what they did. We're all adults and should act accordingly. He called me disgusting again and hung up. My parents found out and agreed that I should pay for the air mattress because I wasn't adequately prepared for their arrival. My mother especially keeps insinuating that what I did was gross and unfair, and I should have known better. My brother has let it be known that our relationship won't go back to normal until I apologize and reimburse him and his girlfriend. I know my family can be kind of weird and uptight, so I asked my significant other and some friends for their perspective. My boyfriend says he can see both sides, and my friends are basically siding with my parents and brother. Well, what do you think? Should OP pay her brother the $55 for the air mattress or not? Please let us know.
Support the channel by joining as a member today, and we'll give you a shout out in our next video.
Or come watch this video next. You won't believe what Karen does in that one.